Morning. I am a panhandler, a beggar, and you've judged me with your words. Most of you, not directly to my face. It's the comments that you say under your breath as you walk by, or as you try to usher your wife away from me to protect her. But that's who I am, and that's the relationship that we have with one another. Ironically, if I hold up a sign in which you would deem more honest, you judge me less. If I say, "Will you give me money for beer?" you'll laugh, and you might actually be more likely to help me. I'm an outcast. Again, I'm constantly feeling judged by you. And feeling judged because, again, it's not always the words that you're saying to my face. So often, it's the lack of words. It's that you're not saying any words. It's that you look at me and you have the opportunity to open your mouth and speak something to me, and you close it and you walk away. I've got an addiction, and you will never know. I'm your brother, I'm your best friend, but I will not tell you about what I'm struggling with, because every time it comes up in public, I hear you judge. You don't know that you're judging me, because you say things like, "I don't know how anybody could ever do that. Those people are just so vile. They're so messed up." I've done some things in my past, things that I don't walk around with them on my name tag. Right? I don't have a hat that says, "I had an abortion when I was 19 or 35. And again, the way that you talk about that as an issue, say, "Hey, I'm with you. I actually am pro-life." But in that time of my life, I cannot express to you the emotions, the storms, the pain, the feeling that I had no options. But I don't feel like I can ever share that with you because of how you speak about things. These are the people in our lives. These are the people that are sitting all around you today. Statistically, 1 in 6 women have had an abortion. So we can get on a soapbox and start talking about all of our things and not realize that you might get some people fired up and encouraged, and you might get some people cowering down and looking for a place to hide. Our Master, our Savior, our Creator says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." So we are, as we've been talking about, in a series of lessons. This is lesson 2 about how can we speak like Jesus. And in a huge way in which our speech can either reflect Christ or not is if and how we judge. If you've got a Bible, I would encourage you to turn to Matthew chapter 7, and we are going to look at several scriptures from the text. For the most part, I'm not going to have those scriptures on the screen. So what we're going to do and how we're going to dissect this, it will be really helpful if you can be looking at being able to see all of verses 1 through 14 together, whether that be on your phone. I mean, you might have to toggle up and down a little bit, or in your paper Bible. So I'll read that in a second. These are the last two verses, are verses 13 and 14. We just read the first two verses, do not judge, or you too will be judged. Oftentimes, what we will do is we will read those two verses, and I think that section ends in verse 6, the section about Jesus talking about judging. And then it says, ask, and it will be given. So it seems like, and because there's a little heading in my Bible that says ask, seek, knock, that Jesus is done talking about that and he's on to something new. But how I would like us to look at this text this morning from the Sermon on the Mount, from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus' words, is that verses 1 through 14 are the whole part of this section. We're going to look at them together. So this ends with this. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. So this, not looking at these verses as Jesus talked about this, and then Jesus talked about that, and now Jesus is just making one random but important and good lesson about gates and roads and narrows and destructions and life and things like that. But that Jesus is using that this is actually a summary statement of everything that he's talked about in the last 12 verses. So let's go back and we'll read this. It says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged, and the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, while all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give to dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you'll find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, would give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, would give him a snake? If you, then though you are evil, if you know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything you do, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. So we have a path that leads to destruction. And Jesus begins with saying this negative command, do not judge. All right? And then follows that up with a couple of good stories about not judging and why that's important. We'll get back to that in a second. So do not judge. But what should we do? So there's a path that leads to death and destruction that is very popular, and that's the path of being judgmental. And there's a path that is more gracious and leads to life, and that is the seeker path, the path that asks and seeks and knocks. And what are the results? So he says right away, do not judge, or you too will be judged. Does anyone, for the most part, in the condemnation sense, enjoy being judged? Any takers? Some of you are a little like, oh, I love it. No, but... And yet, the person who asks will receive. If you seek, you'll find. If you knock, the door will be open to you. Go on. Jesus tells some stories to explain further. All right, what do we mean when you judge? If you're judging and you get into this rut of judgment, don't judge because you will be judged by others. And the same measure that you use in your judgment, that will be used against you. This is kind of a very practical teaching of how human beings interact. And here's the other reasons you shouldn't judge, because when you get into judging, typically and mostly, you end up making yourself look like a hypocrite. Because when you get into judging and you point out the flaws of all these people, they are going to respond in kind and see you and all of your flaws. And immediately being able to say in their mind, well, who are you to judge me? Or how can you say those things about me or put me down in those ways when I know this is what's going on in your life? It leads to blindness. That log in your eye, that plank in your eye causes you to not be able to see. That plank in your eye causes you to look at the dog and saying, oh, the dog will appreciate what's sacred. Instead of reaching and giving the pig the food that the pig desperately wants, you give the pig a bunch of pearls. When we judge, that's the same thing. We've got people all around us that are looking for grace. They're looking for attention, positive attention. And when we judge, we're giving them something that they weren't looking for, they weren't ready for. And the contrast is going to be so great that it may cause them to retaliate. Now, on the other hand, ask and it'll be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Right? So these things aren't directly in here, but if you know how it is, if your own child comes to you and says, can I have a piece of bread? Are you going to give him a stone? No, like who is that? None of you are that evil. And so you understand the idea of asking and receiving because you're people of integrity. That's what a person of integrity does. They ask. And when they're asked, they give what they're asked for. And so we can kind of see these things are the opposites there. Now, I believe, because you can say, whoa, Rob, right here in my Bible, in verse 11, it says, if you're evil and you know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? This passage is about prayer. And to that I would disagree with you. I think if you're going to take that one verse and say this whole thing, all of the asking and seeking and knocking is about prayer, it's about asking God, it's about seeking God, it's about knocking on God's door, then what you've done is you've taken the one verse and made it apply to everything, where the flow of everything is really person to person. Jesus never reflects on the Father in all of this until this verse. So the asking is, don't judge that person, ask them. Seek from them. Seek to find out what their situation is, what's going on in their life. Knock on the door, knock on their door. Because it's a lot easier for me to say, do you know what's going on with that guy? Our neighbor? They've been yelling. He hasn't mowed his lawn in 3 weeks.